Hi, I'm Lynn Preston and
With Rosenblum.
Rosenblum this morning, and we're talking about this taped interview that we did with Gene about being Jewish. What were you most surprised about?
I was surprised that he had as strong a Jewish education as he had.
Mm-hmm.
To hear that and to see that there were Hebrew books there, books in Hebrew, that he had attended Talmud Torah. Yeah, I was surprised.
Yes, how embedded
Yeah.
he was
Yeah.
in Jewish life.
Right.
He was bar mitzvahed.
Yeah, he was bar mitzvahed, he said, in Brooklyn. He said that he left, that they escaped from Austria when he was about 12. And he had bar mitzvah when they came to Brooklyn, New York, via Holland and France, I think.
That story, such an incredible story. And I remember he had told me a few years ago about how there were all kinds of escape routes that people knew about, and then different people would find out about different ones. And what was that story about the woman who his father called the angel,
Right.
that had helped them to escape, a Jewish woman in their town?
Right, and
In Vienna, right?
in Vienna.
Yes.
And they took a train somewhere.
Right. She found this train route.
Yes. And they knew when to cross the border into, I guess it was Holland. She said that they knew that Sunday mornings, the usual guard at the border went to church. And so someone else took over who didn't care very much about the whole thing. And so they waited until Sunday morning. And that's when they crossed without difficulty. He said his father had some papers. He talked about the blue one. These precious papers had arrived so that they were able to get out.
And then that part about how the papers had just arrived the day that they were leaving.
Yes.
His father went up to check the mail, and these papers that would allow them to escape had just arrived in this blue envelope, and he could remember the look of that blue,
precious blue.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I remember in the story that they stopped, the train stopped, and they were looking for someone and asked people, called out people's names, and his heart was in his mouth, and they didn't call out their names, and so it was he and his mother and father that escaped through this route.
And I think you had asked also what happened with this woman, and apparently Gene's father helped her to escape later on, after she had been this angel to so many others.
Yes, isn't that amazing? Isn't it wonderful that she actually was able to escape also?
Yeah.
And then there's the story of being in Holland and his memory of this tiny little room with so many people that I forget the metaphor he used, that there wasn't room to take a breath. That they were living in.
Yeah, waiting for, I guess, the okay or the tickets and so on to come to the States. It reminded me of the images and the descriptions from Anne Frank the numbers of people crowded in, waiting, hiding, so on and so forth. He told a couple of stories there that it was not so clear on. One being that while they were in Vienna, his father had been rounded up and was in jail
Yes,
for a while.
his father was in jail.
And
Yes.
I said something about, do you remember or how it was for you to know that your father was jailed? He sort of said, well, it wasn't as bad. I don't exactly remember, but he was jailed with a lot of good people and they were able to talk and it wasn't so terrible. And a number of times that he spoke, it was like an attempt to reduce the trauma or something. That it wasn't as horrible as one might think it
Right,
would be,
right.
something like that.
Yes,
It was a little unclear for me, some of it.
Yes, yes. And then that story about his being in Holland and the barrels of herring. Yes. And when I had asked him what he wanted me to bring him, he said, I would love that really salty herring like with fish. And his memory of being able to buy, this was poor people's food,
Right.
this very salty herring, and they would wrap it in a piece of newspaper and take it home and soak it in water for about a half hour before they could eat it. And this to him was the taste of freedom. He was there, he had that herring, and when I brought it to him from Russ and Daughters, he almost wept, tasting that.
Yeah.
He said the richer people, had herring in oil, but of course they couldn't afford that. But what he wants is the herring, the schmaltz herring, that's very, very salty.
That's what brings that felt sense, that memory. He also said something about, again, it was not so clear, that he and his father were picked up in Holland briefly.
Yes,
Right?
they were in prison.
They were both
Briefly,
in prison.
yes.
And he didn't go there.
No.
Anytime I would say something like, oh my God, that must have been, he would sort of shift.
Yes,
And
yes,
doesn't
yes.
want to, something that goes like this around really what I imagine is very traumatic, frightening experiences, imprisonments and separations from father.
Well, we would think that, and we might think that he's repressing that, or maybe that from a child's view, he felt very safe with his father.
Yeah.
And they were victorious. And he loved America. He loved English. He learned English, within a few months.
Yeah.
And did very, very well and felt very at home in America. It was like coming home to some place for him.
Yeah. I think the other thing that touched me was his father moved them down to the Washington, D.C. area for a while as they were trying to get settled here and his father finding work and so on and so forth. And he said something about his father didn't want to stay in Brooklyn. It was too, I thought maybe it was too Jewish or too old, too connected with
Too isolated.
something. Yes, something. Again, not so clear. But he said when they were in Washington, he was in school there, public school. It was still segregated public schools.
Yes,
Right.
and he was horrified.
And he was horrified, and he said something like, the blacks are America's Jews.
Yes.
They are being discriminated against here, and how upsetting that was for him.
Yes.
This was not the American
That he knew.
Yeah.
Yes.